Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 23 of season 1 of Arrow called Sacrifice. And here it is, folks, the big season finale. Really been hyped, but oh man, it delivers. It makes everything in this season just wow. I mean, not that there weren't weak episodes, and not that there weren't even a few episodes that were just pretty much bad, but still, this is the culmination of some very good, very intricate writing, and I love it. I love when shows really have things planned out and can bring things to fruition in this sort of fashion. We never really got that, I think, on Smallville. I even remember reading an interview with the producers where they had wrapped up like season 5 and they said, well, okay, now we're going to sit down and start figuring out what we're going to do for season 6. And it actually made me really mad because I'm like, you're honestly telling me that you don't have a plan for this whole arc that Clark is supposed to go on in order for him to become Superman? And frankly, if you watch Smallville, that becomes glaringly obvious very early on. Not to mention all the contradictions. Blah. Okay, but anyway, that's not the show we're dealing with here. We're dealing with Arrow, and it does it so very well. Anyway, so let's just kind of get right into things. And one thing that I really like is because this is a culmination episode, there are just so many things that, as I said, come to fruition. Things that, especially in terms of the characters, that are really, really brought into light. For example, I like how Malcolm, when he and Oliver are, really kind of in conflict with each other, even points out that what Oliver is doing as the vigilante is in some ways very similar to what Malcolm is doing. They're both doing all this incredible violence, killing all these people in order to honor their loved one. And this whole thing, with Oliver killing people, this is really more than anything, even more than Laurel, I think, what really drove a wedge between him and Tommy. And one thing that I like about Tommy is that Tommy stuck to his principles on that one. He never could really, in any way, shape, or form, condone what Oliver was doing. I mean, even Felicity, who is a good and moral person, has more or less signed on with the fact that it's okay, that she thinks it's okay for Oliver to go around and kill people. But Tommy never did that. Tommy was always firmly against that. Now, granted, Tommy did act like a dick towards Oliver a few times, but as we've discussed here, Tommy, I mean, with Oliver and Laurel and his dad and everybody around him, was just constantly really being a jerk to Tommy. Now, Oliver was not honest with Tommy about. I mean, like I said, Oliver never took the time to really sit down and even really clue Tommy in, give him any sort of indication as to what he had been gone through on that island. Certainly didn't bother to bring him in there to the level that he did with even Dig and Felicity. And this is the guy who's been his best friend since childhood, the closest thing that Oliver has to a brother. And Oliver would not even share that with him. And this episode, it's quite nicely pointed out that Oliver said, "You know what, Tommy, you should go and really should be with Laurel." Oh wait, I'm gonna go sleep with Laurel. And I like how Oliver didn't even try and defend himself. He really knew that he couldn't. And of course, that brings us to let's sort of start off with Tommy, since his death is really the big centerpiece of this episode. And that kind of brings us to, well, Tommy's death, where he goes and he ultimately sacrifices himself to save Laurel. Now, you got to think, what is going to be going through Laurel's mind when she's had some time to calm down and deal with what's happened, the ramifications of everything on a personal level? Here's Tommy, who says that, the last thing she basically hears him say is that he always loved her. And this is immediately after she had slept with his best friend. I mean, really, Laurel is going to be basically drowning in guilt over what has happened to Tommy. And I think Oliver is in for an insanely rude surprise once things start to shake down, when suddenly Laurel's having second thoughts about this whole get back into a relationship with Oliver Queen thing. But that sort of twist the knife. That's good comic book storytelling. And continuing on with what I said, and this is something that I have brought up time and again in the reviews of these episodes, is that Tommy really was the most moral person in this entire season. I mean, look at the part scene where he tries to stop his dad. He literally pulls a gun on his own father. Again, this is an example of how Tommy really, really would just had this stand, and he would not back down on it. He would not tolerate anybody, his best friend, his dad, going around killing people. And I like how another thing is that the show, this whole season, was kind of dropping these hints, sort of alluding that Oliver would ultimately probably kill Malcolm, and then Tommy would take up and become the new Dark Archer and become Oliver's archenemy and all this. I mean, that's what so many of us were expecting. I mean, even I thought that the show was going to go in that direction. And I like why it didn't. Stop and think about it. The whole big thing, the whole big problem that Tommy has with Oliver is killing people. If Tommy were to go down that road and become the second Dark Archer, he'd be a hypocrite, because you can't do that without killing people. He can't go down that road without basically wanting to kill his best friend. And as I said, the whole thing with Tommy and his big moral stance is that he is opposed to people going around and killing each other. So him actually not becoming the Dark Archer, or Dark Archer 2.0, or whatever you want to call it, that makes total sense. And I love it when shows can take my expectations and twist them in a way that I don't expect, but in retrospect makes perfect sense. Now, honestly, the only thing that I really didn't like about that scene at the end between Oliver and Tommy is that it looks like Oliver chooses to take that moment to lie to Tommy about killing his dad. Now, I'm pretty sure Malcolm's dead. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, what we saw was I think there's a little room for ambiguity, but really, I am genuinely, seriously convinced that Malcolm is dead. Now we'll talk about a little bit more about what it might mean if he's not later on, but I can forgive Oliver for that. He knows that he's almost certainly saying goodbye to his best friend. He knows that Tommy is going to make it, but he wants to say, things that'll try and make Tommy at least fight for it. Just that sliver of possibility that Tommy might make it through is enough to get him to, say, to lie to him in those final moments. And I really like how ultimately, once Tommy dies, Oliver even says, it should have been me. I mean, this is a beautiful parallel to when Tommy and Oliver were in conflict at the beginning of this episode, where Tommy says to him, I wish you had died on this island. And that, in turn, is, of course, a wonderful parallel to what Laurel said to him in the very first episode, where she tells Oliver, I wish it had been you that had died out on that boat instead of Sarah. Yeah, that's some good writing right there. And let's see. No, I really don't have too much else to say about Tommy's death. Let's take let's kind of wrap up the Merlins, and we'll move on to talking about the Queens and the Lances a little bit more. So Malcolm. Well, once again, we get to see just the absolute batshit levels of insanity that Malcolm has gone to. I mean, he's practically foaming at the mouth when he's howling about how the people in the Glades don't deserve to live. And, it's a real testament to John Barrowman that he can really do such a wonderful range of things. We see the moment where those moments where Malcolm is just, as I said, practically foaming at the mouth. We see Malcolm coldly collected. We see Malcolm even regretful and apologetic when he's talking to Oliver at the very beginning. And of course, we get to see that patented, John Barrowman little smirk more than a few times, especially when he's in that little room saying that he's been waiting for Oliver and Dig. Now, I do have to say, I was a little disappointed by that scene at the very beginning where Malcolm just sort of, leaves Oliver chained up, and with a couple of vague, non-threatening thugs just hanging around. I mean, come on, that's Bond villain stupidity. It's more than one person has said. You know, Malcolm is totally going to have to kill Oliver after this. There's no way, shape, or form around it. So the question is, of course, why not kill Oliver then and be done with it? You've given him your little speech, and doubtlessly, if things had gone as planned, he'd have just come back there and killed him afterwards. So really, why leave the guy there to hang? Literally. I mean, it's just dumb. But anyway, I did like that Malcolm, was in a way apologetic to Oliver, and in that kind of I'm sorry that you got caught up in this, and it was even funny that he actually thanked him for saving his life. And what's really great about just how crazy Malcolm is that you can believe he is genuinely sorry that he had to kill Robert Queen. I mean, he's not going to really lose sleep over it, and it being necessary certainly wouldn't have stopped him, but he's not going to be happy that he had to kill a man who, in all likelihood, was one of the real friends that he had in the world. But again, that just highlights just how twisted and ruthless that Malcolm had become. And I also like that he even, again, also apologized to Oliver for, putting him in the situation that left him stranded on that island. And, not just the whole other stuff that he's done, like trying to have Oliver killed when he came, he did try and have Oliver killed. So, and of course, I like how he really does zoom in very closely on, why Oliver can't beat him. He's like, you can't beat me because you don't know what you're willing to sacrifice. And, Malcolm does raise a very good point. Oliver really has a list of names and a lot of anger, and that's about it. Malcolm has a much more focused goal. He had a focused goal. And in many ways, that is really what does give him an edge. And it is reevaluating, what it is he is willing to sacrifice that ultimately gives Oliver the edge he needs to take down Malcolm. And one of the things that he does sacrifice is his absolute insistence on doing things his way, the way he does. Here, he and Dig go into battle as brothers. Before Dig was sort of the support guy. Not the sidekick in any way, shape, or form, but seriously a support guy. Here it's pure on team up. I mean, I like how they even say brothers. And, while Dig gets an assist on this one, because really, this is the story of Oliver versus Malcolm. But, it is enough to give Oliver that edge. And of course, there's the whole sacrifice that Oliver has to make of being willing to stab himself with an arrow through his own chest in order to take down Malcolm. But, well, I like how, as other people have pointed out, ultimately in this is a story where in a way the villain wins, or at least half wins. Half of the Glades is toast. Malcolm didn't get everything that he wanted. In fact, he lost a lot. He's probably dead. His name is disgraced. His son is dead. His company is going to be torn apart by the government investigation. But still, he struck back. He struck a blow against the Glades that nobody will ever forget. Doubtlessly, countless people have died. So, Malcolm Merlyn got his revenge. Maybe he didn't get everything he wanted, but he still made the Glades suffer and bleed. Malcolm Merlyn won. When was the last time you saw a story where the villain more or less did win? Anyway, so speaking of the Glades, I suppose we might as well talk about the Glades' most notable resident, and that is, of course, Roy Harper. Well, we don't get to spend a huge amount of time with Roy and Thea this episode, but here we really get to see Roy out there demonstrating, his destiny. Not now, or at least the possibility of him achieving the destiny of the Roy Harper in the comics. Here we see him, taking that really solid moral stand for the first time. Him sacrificing, the chance to escape with Thea in order to help save the lives of innocent people. Him going out there and putting himself in danger for no other reason, like when he's taking on those guys in the alley, than to help somebody who is in need of assistance. Yeah, I mean, in fact, you can even make the case that what Roy is doing is actually more heroic than what Oliver's doing. What Oliver is doing is, in many ways, motivated just simply by a desire for revenge or to strike back against those whom he thinks are morally in the wrong. Roy is out there just simply helping people. I mean, sure, he's beating up muggers in alleys, but it is just really pure altruism. There is no crossing names off the list for Roy Harper. And I like how, well, Thea, this is really one of those, I think, really where I really start to buy into their relationship. The way that she says that, Roy lives in the Glades and I love him, and how she charges down into the Glades to go and make sure that Roy is safe, when she could really just sit at the Queen Mansion and know that she's probably going to be perfectly fine. That shows that Thea has, in many ways, evolved as a character. Now, I am disappointed that we didn't get to spend more time with her as a character. I think that there was a lot more they could have done with her. But still, I'm ultimately satisfied that we got a pretty good story out of Thea this year. And of course, we got the allusion to her wicked aim skills. So that's really going to do a nice job of fueling the speculation as to who is going to ultimately become Speedy in this universe. And I did find it interesting that Thea apparently gets her middle name from her mother's middle name. Now, as we've said before, of course, Dearden is the last name of Mia Durden, who was the second Speedy in the comics. Now, I'm not really sure what the significance of Thea getting her middle name from her mom is. It's probably just a nice little reminder to folks that they haven't forgotten about that. But anyway, so let's move over and talk about what's going on with Laurel and Quentin Lance. First of all, just to sort of speak about what's going on with Laurel. Hey, did you guys notice? Is it just me, or was Joanna back at CNRI? Was that her that Laurel told to get out of there? If so, I'm glad that she's back. Just because the way that she left the show seemed pretty weak. I don't know. Maybe the actress needed some time off for a while. Who knows? It's ultimately not important. But if I would like to see Joanna fleshed out as a supporting character. Laurel needs somebody that she can have some girl talk with, and Thea, I think, is just a little bit too young for that. It would actually be interesting to see her and Felicity have some scenes together. And it looks like Felicity might actually be in need of a good lawyer coming up soon. Although, if she's Oliver Queen's friend and he's still this billionaire, you have to wonder why he can't just afford an entire army of lawyers to defend her. But it's TV, right? But anyway, I think I've already talked about some of the guilt that I think Laurel's going to be going through with in regards to Tommy's death next season. And I did like that scene between her and Oliver, and I really liked how Oliver said to her that she saw the man he was, rather than all that junk that was outside of him. And I like how he says, like, I don't understand how in the world you saw that in me. And again, that just really shows how far Oliver has come as a character. I mean, like I said last time around, even Quentin Lance acknowledges that Oliver's not as bad as he seems, or at least had him pegged. But apart from that, there's really not a whole lot to say about what was going on with Laurel's character, apart from that conversation that she had with her dad on the phone. Now, I gotta say, Katie Cassidy absolutely rocked that scene. Paul Blackthorne absolutely bringing his A game. That really was some of the best stuff we've gotten out of both of those characters this entire season. I mean, that really, to me, in my book, was Quentin Lance's highlight. He really, really just really was strongly elevated as a character by this episode. And, sacrifice is one of the themes in this episode. And you know, like Laurel had previously sacrificed whatever she had with Tommy in order to go be with Oliver again, and that doesn't seem to have worked out so well. Here, Quentin cops to his lieutenant that he's been working with the vigilante, thus basically sacrificing his career to help save people in the Glades. Now, the only problem I had with that scene is, isn't this the same guy who basically said, people seem to like the vigilante, so we're not really going to do anything about it? And then he has the nerve to go on get on Quentin's case about all this. Like, hey, dude, didn't you say, weren't you the guy who was making a big deal about how you were going to catch the vigilante? Like, wait a minute, dude, you're the one who is turning a blind eye to the vigilante, but you're going to go and criticize the guy whose job it is to catch the vigilante? Now, granted, saying you're going to catch the vigilante and then teaming up with the vigilante and working with him, okay, that's some pretty noticeable hypocrisy, but still. I'm thinking that maybe some kind of okay, we're just gonna forget about all of that since you helped save half the Glades thing. Just might be in Quentin's future next season. But yeah, I really just cannot say enough good things about the way Quentin was going in there, ready to sacrifice himself in that phone call he made to Laura. Brilliant stuff. Now Felicity. Let's finish up. Let's talk about her. Again, Felicity didn't really have a huge amount going on this episode, but that scene of her sitting in the Arrow Cave, things shaking around her, and her obviously tearing up, obviously extremely afraid. I mean, remember, the club is related in the Glades, but you have to think that I don't think Felicity was that scared for her own life. I think she was really just terrified for what was going to happen for all the people out there who were almost certainly going to die. Now, granted, I'm sure she had some fear for her own safety, but that just really doesn't strike me as what was going on in her mind and in her heart. We've seen that even though she condones what Oliver does, that aside, Felicity is one of the most moral people on the show. Her, Tommy, and Walter, the real moral compasses for people. And her literally tearing up at the idea that all these thousands of innocent people were going to die. Well, hopefully, if thousands of innocent people were going to die, most of us would probably be in the feel like shedding a few tears. But here, Felicity is connected to this. If people die, it means that she has also failed. That she, as a member of Team Arrow, just wasn't able to bring enough to the table to save everybody. The villain wins. Malcolm Merlyn won. And, again, I gotta say, where he says redundancy, oh, that was beautiful. Dig. I think I've really said everything that I have to say about Dig. Here exactly what Dig's relationship with Oliver is, it's sort of been very unclear. He made it very clear at the very beginning he wasn't going to be a sidekick, and I'd say they've done a pretty good job of making it, clear that isn't the case between him and Oliver. But just what is their relationship, and especially in those moments where Dig walked away from Oliver, where Oliver didn't keep his word to Dig about helping take down Deadshot. It's been very, very hard to pin down just what's going on with these guys. But here it's made clear. Brothers. And, well, now that Tommy's dead, I'd say that Oliver is in fact in the market for a new unofficial brother. So, yeah, hey, nice new job, Dig. Enjoy. Okay, so now I think it's time to talk about Moira. And here, again, we see someone sacrificing. And here, Moira sacrifices, in a way, so much. She's arrested at the end of it when she spills the beans about the undertaking. I mean, her good name is undoubtedly ruined. She's already been not exactly sacrificed, but lost Walter. And of course, we get to see her just continuing to make sacrifices for the safety and well-being of her children. Here she has to sacrifice, all this house of cards that she's built, all these things that she's done. I mean, a lot of what's going on is going to come out in the wash. I don't think Moira's going to be able to hide her hand in Frank Chen's death, for example. So, it's pretty safe to say Moira's probably going to jail. But she finally did it. She finally stood up and struck back against Malcolm. She continued to do what it is she had to do, whatever she had to do, in order to protect her children. Now, you have to wonder, exactly how much has Moira figured out about what's going on with Oliver? I mean, she has to know that Oliver is more than just some guy who owns a nightclub. I mean, she didn't even really question him when he came to her to talk to her about the undertaking and had all these bruises on his face. She didn't say one word about that. So it wouldn't surprise me if Moira next season probably hasn't. I don't think she suspects that Oliver is the vigilante, but it wouldn't surprise me if she thinks that Oliver has some sort of a connection to the vigilante. Maybe she thinks he's bankrolling him or something. And if that's the case, then that certainly puts an interesting spin on what she must think of when the vigilante showed up and pointed that bow at her. On the other hand, the vigilante sure did lower that bow awfully quickly, just after she started talking about her family and holding up that picture. You gotta wonder, that's probably not something that Moira's forgotten, is it? And, yeah, I think that covers everything that I had to say about Moira. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Okay. We do need to talk about the island. I actually forgot to do that last time around. Here we get to see Oliver finally kill somebody, and it's the much deserving Eddie Friars. They do manage to, of course, prevent the missile from blowing up that airliner, which apparently nobody on the airliner noticed. I mean, you think that you'd notice. Somebody would have been looking out the window and going, "Hey, what's that thing streaking towards us?" And if that's the case, or at least, "Hey, what was that explosion on that island we're flying over?" And isn't there going to be some kind of investigation as to just why this plane was off course? And isn't it ultimately going to be revealed that someone used a phony radio message to do that? And oh yeah, okay, again, there's just a million plot holes you can pick apart right there that all ultimately add up to the idea that somebody should have come poking around Lian Yu and found Oliver and the people there. But maybe that'll be dealt with next season. I don't really feel like dealing with it because ultimately it's not important. What is important, though, is we really do see Oliver taking that big step on to becoming Green Arrow. He has shown that he does have what it takes to kill when necessary and to be the master of the bow that he ultimately becomes. And of course, having done all this, that certainly has to have earned him some pretty serious respect from Slade and Shadow. And of course, this also brings up another parallel between Oliver and Shadow. Shadow's father made all those choices, all those sacrifices in order to protect her, and ultimately died for it. Oliver's father murdered an innocent man, killed himself in order to in order to save Oliver. These are two people with dads who were willing to do anything to protect them. And you have to think that in the light of all that's happened in the island after that Oliver and Shadow are probably going to be bonding a little bit more in that regards, and possibly more given the attraction that we saw earlier in this season. So yeah, I think there's going to be quite a lot of interesting stuff going on that island the next season. Now we come, of course, to Oliver himself. And of course, the big question is for Oliver: what is Oliver willing to sacrifice? And we've really talked about this a little bit. He's willing to sacrifice his relentlessness, his determination that he really has to do this to some degree on his own. His view that Dig and Felicity are support. No, okay, they're full-fledged members. He and Dig are brothers in this. They are in all ways equals. And let's face it, Oliver, whatever he might have said earlier, he wasn't really towing that line for a lot of the season. And of course, Oliver is willing to take those stances, even against his own mother, in order to save all those people in the Glades. He's willing to lie to Tommy in his dying moments, just for the chance of giving him something that might help him survive, even though when he knows Tommy is doomed. So, what is Oliver willing to sacrifice? Oliver is willing, in my mind, to sacrifice a lot of what it is that he had become to get as far as he had. To go into battle with Dig fully at his side, to get on the case of the people that he cared about, like his mom. He is willing to sacrifice part of who he is in order to become a better hero, and to ultimately to try and save all those people's lives. And of course, in the end, he defeats Malcolm, but it's not enough. All that stuff that Oliver sacrificed, all that everyone sacrificed, wasn't enough. Malcolm Merlyn won. Not a complete victory, but still, Malcolm Merlyn won. And now Starling City is forever changed. And you have to wonder, remember, in the comics, Green Arrow hangs out in Star City. Half of the Glades has been destroyed. Half of Starling is Star. Is Starling City, in its efforts to rise from the ashes, perhaps going to rename itself as symbolic, a star of hope? Again, that's just complete and utter speculation on my part. But you gotta wonder. And if all these characters over the course of the season can undergo such tremendous evolutions, if you can take a good-for-nothing playboy kid and turn him into a badass vigilante hero, then what can a city evolve into? What is a city willing to sacrifice? And how will Oliver deal with the fact that Oliver Queen failed Starling City because Malcolm Merlyn won? Tune in next season. I'll be back with my reviews for Arrow Season 2. I think it's going to be awesome. And with that, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.